So, hey guys, today we're going to be talking about one of the strongest reasons why Yu-Gi-Oh is kind of a good card game. You'll rarely catch me talking positively about Yu-Gi-Oh nowadays. Yep, definitely won't catch that often. So, enjoy while you can, I guess. So, even with a normal monster like Blue Eye Silver Zombie, the amount of things you can actually do with this card just by itself, so we're not thinking of cards like the Primite cards. If we have just Blue Eyed Silver Zombie, we have a lot of options that we could do with this card. So, just to list a few, we can set this card, we can normal summon this card, we can special summon it, we can attack with it, we can have it face down in defense, we can have it regularly in defense position, and we can attack with this card as well into other cards. We can attack into defense position monsters. We can attack into other attack position monsters. And that means we can technically destroy this by battle and destroy other cards by battle with this card. And this is just a level 3 kind of vanilla monster. Of course, we can also tribute this for a tribute summon. Like, technically, I mean, it's not that likely because of this garbage stat line, but we could, in theory. So there's a lot we can say about like Blue-Eyed Silver Zombie here that we could technically do, and this applies to not just this crappy vanilla. It applies to like every single monster in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh that you could theoretically summon, and anything that you can summon here. Well, they have a lot of usages and things you can do with them, even without considering card effects yet. And if we were to compare to, well, we'll say specifically for the comparison for today, we'll be using Legends of Runeterra. So in Legends of Runeterra, your monsters can be in your hand, and then you can just summon them. There's no alternate positions or anything, and then you can kind of attack with them. And we're talking basic mechanics here. And when you're defending, it's just like regular battle still. So you can attack or defend with them, but they're in the same positions during the battles, and the amount of things you can do arguably less. And of course, I forgot to mention this, but there's also 5 monster zones where you can technically place your monsters in terms of like main deck monsters, and then you have the 6 EMZ, so you have 6 overall, but 5 main ones to mostly consider. So now in Legends of Runeterra, you have just basically the monster zone area, and you just put your monsters in there wherever willy-nilly. Doesn't really matter like at all, because there's nothing that cares about like their placement and all of that. When you do battle though, there's stuff to do with like being left or right of a thing, and that affects like supporter abilities or something. So in terms of options of what we can do with monsters, it's already higher. And then when we go to the card text, so if we actually had a monster, like I don't know why I have so many vanillas here on this front page, but yeah, in terms of effects, our card effects can say basically whatever it wants, and you would do that effect. So with this example, this is actually a little bit of a fun one. I mean, the actual effect isn't that great, but offer your opponent a handshake. If they accept your handshake, each player's life points become half the combined life points of both players. If you have Unity in your hand and show it to your opponent, they must accept the handshake. So, in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, you can just force your opponent to shake your hand, technically. I mean, in like paper, apparently you just have to acknowledge the handshake, and you don't actually have to perform the handshake, which is just I don't even want to get into that exactly, but yeah, just the concept of being able to play a card that makes your opponent have to shake your hand. Isn't that wild? And I mean, you can do a whole slew of things, like just a lot of things. So another one I think is that's kind of funny, like not necessarily that useful. So we'll just go over a few of these cards, I guess. We have Relay Soul. Special summon one monster from your hand. While it is face up on your field, you take no damage. When it leaves the field, your opponent wins the duel. So Yeah, you can special summon a monster from your hand, and then if it's gone, if it leaves the field, your opponent just wins the duel. Yeah. So this card obviously not that good, but if you look at the effect as a whole, this effect's pretty insane, right? And then we have also, I guess we'll go with Clashing Souls. So Clashing Souls, during damage calculation, if your attack position monster battles an opponent's attack position monster with higher attack, the control of the battling monster with lower attack can pay 500 life points for that monster to gain 500 attack during damage calculation only. Then keep repeating this effect until a player chooses not to pay life points. Neither player takes any battle damage from that battle. Also, after damage calculation, if any player's monster would be destroyed by that battle, send all cards that player controls to the graveyard instead. So we have some crazy kind of insane effects, and we have the potential to make said crazy kind of wild monsters with like insane effects or dumb effects. But yeah, because of the formatting and how card effects work in Yu-Gi-Oh in general, like since we don't have keywords, the potential of what we can do with cards is just much higher than any other card game. Yeah, just based on this. So for example, in terms of cards, we have cards that can really do it all. We have cards that can banish cards from our deck. We have cards that can send cards from our deck to the graveyard. There are cards that can put cards in our banish pile back into the deck, or from banish pile to the graveyard. So essentially, it's almost to a point where if you're thinking of some sort of card effect, it's very likely that there's some card that does what you're thinking. So let's see. What would be a kind of outlandish effect? How about um, calling a card on top of your deck? And if you are correct, something happens. Like we have, I think, two of those. I'm not 100% sure if there's any more than that. But yeah, we have two cards kind of like that. There's one where you declare before your opponent draws their card, and if you are correct in what you declare, card just they don't get to add it to their hand; it just goes straight to the graveyard. And then there is True Name, where you declare a card, and if it is that card, you get to summon a god from your deck. I mean, yeah, that's about right. And there are a few other cards that are equally as insane, maybe some that are even more insane than some of these examples. And there are also, of course, some toxic cards as well. But I mean, conceptually, you could also just think if you were a game designer in Yu-Gi-Oh, you could make a card that does just about anything, whatever your heart desires. So let's just say I'll make a little bit of an outlandish example. So I can make a main deck monster or an extra deck monster, and I can on the first line of text, I'll say I can apply a restriction. I think it would need probably two restrictions. So first, well, actually, maybe not, but uh, first restriction: this card cannot be summoned. Yeah, just period. You cannot special summon this. You cannot do anything of uh, that category to this monster. It can't be summoned. Period. And then it might have some effects, like let's say you reveal this card in hand and it does a thing for you. Or maybe you just straight up discard the card and it does the thing. Who knows? I could do something like that. I don't think there are any other card games that can really afford to do that necessarily. I mean, maybe you can kind of do it, but then when we get into like some pretty insane effects, there are also, of course, cards that do multiple kind of insane things. So let's, well, they're not necessarily good cards in terms of imbalance, but let's say with Shirin here, or yeah, let's go with Kick Hellos actually. Kick Hellos has the effect of uh, mill 5 cards, Monster Reborn a card, and then you have either a Foolish Burial or an archetypal kind of Rhoda-esque card where you can add any Tailment card from your deck to your hand. So yeah, that's a lot of pretty powerful, insane effects on a card. And also, of course, worth mentioning is that there is no mana system. And because there is no mana system, you have the benefit of just not being restricted by mana in your plays. And that's just a positive. in a lot of regards, honestly. So, for example, let's say, well, it's not like the best thing in the world, but we have our Dark Hole. Okay, so with Dark Hole, we also have Dark Hole Dragon. So Dark Hole Dragon effect, Dark Hole Dragon other effect. We can use all these. We can summon the Dark Hole Dragon kind of for free if it triggers with this thing. And we also have more flexibility in how we utilize our cards to begin with. So with our quick effect cards, I don't think there's anything that's like a quick effect monster in Legends of Runeterra. There's just nothing from what I remember. So yeah, that's a thing where we have some sort of effect tied to a monster that we can use just kind of whenever, or just not use it, which is also a thing. So in Legends of Runeterra, if I recall correctly, every single card effect is technically like regarding monster effects, there are no optional effects. If you play a monster and it has like an effect to add a card, you have to add the card. If it does a damage to your opponent's like monster or follower, whatever you want to use the terminology for, then you have to do that, even if it's not necessarily beneficial to you. But in this case, with like Dark Hole Dragon, we can just choose not to activate this effect if we genuinely don't want to for whatever reason, or the fact to special summon this. We don't have to do that, right? This is not actually mandatory, yeah? You can special summon, but there are also cases where there are cards that are mandatory that we have to do, and there can be benefits to like all these things. And there's just in general, I guess we can say a lot more depth in Yu-Gi-Oh! And more possible depth because of how the card games work and like their differences. In which case, we have I'll say in general more potential and more options in like Yu-Gi-Oh cards in general and what our cards are able to do. So like um, when we attack a monster, we can choose um, what we're attacking into, and there's a lot of choice already with just attacking things, right? So we have ideas of reflecting battle damage. We have ideas of not being destructible by battle. We have the ideas of attacking multiple times. We have ideas like taking attack points from another monster and kind of adding it onto our own, or just taking away those attack points. And that's just like some battle related things, attacking directly, making your opponent forced to attack certain monsters, so they must attack. uh I don't know how much of this you could really implement into like Legends of Runeterra, for example. And also like the game fundamentally works a bit different, right? But the amount of things you can do just with messing around with attack, it's actually a pretty large amount. Just for example, a unique interaction that you might not actually see like necessarily ever is if you actually have 2 0 attack monsters. So this is a thing that I learned because it was relevant to one of the decks I played at the well at some point. If you have Ibli, so Ibli is banned as of currently, but if I were to normal summon Ibli, so this is technically something you could do in any deck, right? And this also plays random here, which is pretty powerful, I suppose. But normal summon Ibli, then I'll link off Ibli for summon Great Elmrush. And there are multiple link ones you could technically link off Ibli for, but with Elmrush in particular, Elmrush has something about it that is particularly worth mentioning. So, Almirage has 0 attack points. Ibli also has 0 attack points. So, with them both having 0 attack points, if they attack into each other, right, then, well, my Almirage, it will just not really care, and you can attack into my Almirage. And what happens is actually nothing happens because they both have 0 attack points. So 0 attack point monsters inherently just can't destroy anything by battle. I believe in previous iterations of the rules. I don't know like when exactly, or if it was supposed to always be like this, but apparently I heard, I'm not like 100% sure on this, that in a previous version of the rules, you might have been able to actually crash zero attack monsters into each other. But yeah, at the moment at least, if you tried to crash Hibli into Almaj, that would not work, and that would be not a valid answer to getting rid of Hibli. You just you're losing your battle phase for no reason essentially. So there's also that, and then there's also the idea of combos. The game's pretty combo centric now at the moment, I guess. But basically, the main idea is that you go from uh like your starters into a combo into an end board with however many interactions or like some sort of interactions to deal with whatever your opponent's cards are to prevent them from winning the game, because you can't actually attack. If you could attack as the going first player, that would be absolutely busted, because you can actually easily get enough attack points to game your opponent because of like how the rules kind of work, you know? So that's kind of wild to think about, that you could very easily get lethal if you were the going first player and you attacked into your opponent. That'd be kind of disgusting, and your opponent would have almost like nothing they could do. But yeah, you have no battle phase. So the going second player, then uh, um, they do have a battle phase. So technically, the going second player has that a kind of advantage where, in theory, they could win the game on the second turn, I guess. And you could, in theory, lose the game if your board was not strong enough, and they can just set up a board, break through yours, and just attack you until you have 0 life points and win the game, right? So the main crux of the interactions in this game is it's basically just trying to use your interactions to stop your opponent from just ending your life, I suppose. I guess that's one way to put it. But yeah, that's the main gameplay loop, I would say. If we were to simplify it, that's kind of what would happen. And in more back and forth games, you would be doing thing, and then your opponent does thing, you do thing, they do thing, and then you kind of do that back and forth for a few turns until one of you can find a way to lethal. In this case, lowering your opponent's life points to 0. So sometimes that's cool, sometimes it's a little bit lame. I mean, it kind of varies, right? Sometimes things are kind of cheese. So let's say, for example, like this isn't necessarily always going to happen, but let's say we're playing. I'll go with a tier limit pile. I suppose it'll probably be a tier limit pile. So you're doing some tier stuff. You mill the Destrido, and for some reason you're also playing Millennium. So you actually only have like 1k life points after Destrido. I believe, right? You pay 2k, you pay another 2k. That puts it you on 4k. So now you go down to 2k from halving with Destrido after like Millennium. So I'm assuming you go into Millennium for like Zombie Vampire and then Moon. And then you would probably go into like Fiendsmith combo to go into Pilgrim Reaper to do Mill. So that'd probably be the combo. And then you go like Destrido effect. But then your opponent can just suddenly decide, I'm gonna burn you for 2000 and GG, that's game. And completely ignore like most of your end board. If they were in theory playing some sort of like burn type card against you, and that would just be kind of absurd. But it would technically work, right? And there's like depth in that sort of way. But I mean, the primary thing is, I suppose, like that's like the ideal version of Yu-Gi-Oh, you know, where you have like a bunch of crazy different effects that you can kind of like mess around with. So it'd be like, oh, my opponent's doing this, but maybe I can do this to get around it, right? That's kind of like the ideal thing that you're kind of looking for as a Yu-Gi-Oh player, I suppose, where both players are kind of able to go wild and do whatever it is they want to do, right? I guess. But in reality, the game is a bit unbalanced. So it's like, oh, my opponent can play the game. That means I just can't play the game. So good game. I guess there wasn't much to be done here, you know. So in the case of like let's say well, I mean, we can look at it from different perspectives. So let's say I am the going first player, okay? So I play a single card. So in this case, we'll go with, I don't know, let's say we're playing Ryzeal here, okay? I'll special summon X Ryzeal. Good game. I actually can't beat like a billion detonator floats, and even if I did have way to out the detonator, you can bring it back with like plug-in. You can reattach material onto it with like plasma hole, and also this is another pop. And then there's also Eclipse Twin, which can bring this back. So that's in reality maybe like we'll say, even if I were to kaiju this, let's say you still have maybe 6 pops, and it's public information that you'll have this, and this or whatever, right? And also, even if I do have a starter, I know you do get a draw with Ryzeal Cross, and you will resolve Dugaris in your combo to draw another 2 times, so you do draw 3, which means it's pretty much, well, it's not 100% guaranteed, but you're insanely likely considering this as maybe a 1 or 2 card combo that you will have a hand trap in hand, at least one, and my starter, which I don't even have in hand. If I were to draw a starter, that's the minimum requirement for me to technically be able to play. That card, it won't even be able to do anything because, you know, uh, because of my opponent's card here. Uh, that yeah, it dies to any one interaction or hand trap. So I have absolutely no hope of winning the game at all. So immediately GG. And then there's also, let's say in reverse now, you set up an end board, and then this would be like going second being kind of OP, right? Tenpai. I'm playing Tenpai. I activate second summoning. You have no way to out summoning. Okay, there's not a single point in time where you can interact or do anything to my board, and you lose. And there's also more kind of unfun cards that you can't really do much about a lot of the time, like Forbidden Droplet. I'll just drop a droplet, you know? Drop some like Lightning Storms, Harpy Feather Dusters, Red Reboot, or whatever. Nothing you can really do about that, and then all of your back row cards are like dead in one way or another. All gone. And if you had a way to, of course, like stop Lightning Storm, then I'll just droplet, whatever could have stopped that. And without even being able to respond, your whole end board is gone. And there wasn't much interaction to be had. And yeah, you're just kind of getting cooked here without being able to do anything. So in one way, you're able to set up any board you want, but then the board gets dismantled without you being able to do anything. And then there's like the other side of things where you set up a board and then your opponent's not able to do anything because your setup is too strong. So balance issues. But I guess worth mentioning with the mana cost stuff, if we go back to that, because we have no mana costs, there is actually an aspect of consistency that's better in Yu-Gi-Oh now than other card games. So let's say, for example, with mana curves, you have to be worried about like, oh, if I have too many 1-cost cards, 2-cost cards, 3-cost cards, or not enough of them, I won't be able to play the game properly. And then there are cases where it's impossible in Yu-Gi-Oh, right? But in like Legends of Runeterra, I've had some games where I have all of my high cost cards that I need for like the late game, and I don't play very many of them. You do get a mulligan, but even if you mulligan, you can still draw like a lot of those crappy cards as well, and you just have bad curve in your hand, like the bad part of your curve, and you can have just 0 playable cards for multiple turns. So in Yu-Gi-Oh, we don't have that issue relating to mana cost specifically. I mean, we can still have cards that we play in the deck that don't do anything at the given moment, right? But we can technically cut a lot of those out, and you've seen this more in like the more modern era where consistency is actually going up, and that's actually like a good thing in general. So if we disregard the fact that like you can't hand trap this deck, like it just does not really work against full power Ryzeal. It's just like ugh, disgusting, right? Could go into that again. That'll take like another 10 minutes to explain, but basically with Ryzeal, if we focus on just purely the consistency, it's like you have 3 of these guys, 3 of these guys, 3 of these guys, and then we'll say we have also 3 copies of On Fire. If we were to just go with that, we have like a 90%-ish, like around there, like 90-80% odds of having at least one starter, and we can just fully do our combo and kind of just always play the game. There's 10% of the time where we won't have a starter, then that kind of sucks. But in theory, because of how flexible like the card design we could theoretically have in Yu-Gi-Oh, we could also actually cut it down so to the point where all of our cards are able to be used, let's say, somewhat going second and somewhat going first, so that we could actually like this is something that you wouldn't really be able to do in other card games. But no matter when you draw a card or what card you open, in theory, like this would be the best version of Yu-Gi-Oh in terms of like just consistency. I think is if we could just fill our deck out with just 40 different one cards that all somewhat do things and might be able to play on our opponent's turn. So we have like really high consistency odds of being able to play the game, at least do some sort of combo. And then we also have the ability then to interact with our opponent. So our opponent's not able to play completely for free, but we're not able to completely stop them either. So it's a little bit more back and forth. I mean, that would be like the idealized version of Yu-Gi-Oh that we could in theory have, because the cards, well, like the game design actually, yeah, the game design technically allows for it, right? So we could have a bunch of one card copies of cards. And I mean, this matters specifically because of hard once per turns. So, if I have multiple XYZs in my opening hand, so I mean, worst case scenario, like one of the worst hands you can get. I mean, it's not something we can really do anything about in the modern game at the moment, but let's say I open double Sword Rise Heal and then double Axe. So this is like completely terrible. And this isn't like the worst thing. So let's grab something even worse. So let's say we have Alistair the Invoker, right? Let's assume your hand is 3 copies of Alistair, and then you have 2 copies of Meltdown, which searches Alistair. So you have essentially every single card in your hand here is more or less the same card. So you only have realistically one play with this hand, where you normal summon Alistair and then try to resolve it. Essentially, this is technically the deck. You do need to run these cards for consistency, but if you draw too many of like whatever card, or you don't draw enough of a certain card, you have this issue where these cards are literally like very literally the exact same card. So if you already have this card, having more copies is not beneficial in any way, and is strictly a negative and take away from your plays, because if they were any other card, so if we were just to remove 1 copy of Alistair and then throw in a different monster, so let's say we throw in Diabellstar instead, now the amount of plays we have, it increases like an insane amount, or just like an Ash Blossom Joy Spring. The amount of interactions and things we can do with that is just like a lot better. And of course, it'd be even better if, considering this is quite literally the same card, we had 4 different cards alongside Alistair. That'd be like an ideal world, or ideal hand. But you can't really control like the RNG aspect of this that well, because you are limited in what cards you can play and what cards you need to play for like certain archetypes and such. So that's kind of miserable in that sort of way, I guess. Where I mean, this is like really kind of niche, and it's not something that happens that insanely often. But drawing multiple copies of the same card, and also have like playing 3 copies of the same card and all that, like causing you, well, also needing to play those 3 cards for your combo and for your like a bunch of deck building kind of reasons. It kind of sucks, right? I mean, if you were just the GOAT, you would simply, I don't know, only have mostly one-ofs, or just open the perfect hand every single time, but that's just nothing. But in theory, Yu-Gi-Oh might be the only card game I know of that you could have in theory. I guess like, well, we don't have it in the sense that the modern game at the moment doesn't allow for it, but like if you give it like, let's say 10-20 years, this might be more possible. Who knows when this would happen. But in theory, I could have, if I had a deck full of just one-ofs, like a 40 card deck with only one-ofs, then I would never have that issue, and we would have like the highest probably I think consistency card game for the most part. I think, I mean, unless you're straight up rigging your hand, maybe I don't know. But yeah, we would have one of the highest consistency card games, where there is like an aspect of card games that I dislike, where if you didn't draw good enough, you just can't play the game with your opponent, right? And if your opponent didn't open good enough, you didn't really get to play the game. I mean, a win is a win, right? But you're playing the game because you want to play the game as well, right? So there, you of course do want to win, but you don't necessarily want a free win. If you want to just free wins, you would just be playing against AI the whole time, right? With like some baby decks where they just normal summon Judge Man on the 5th turn or whatever, right? But if we're actually queuing up for ranked, right? We're not like we do want to win, and we'll use the strongest strategy to do that, of course, right? But we don't want it to be a non-game because we're queuing up and playing Yu-Gi-Oh because we want to play Yu-Gi-Oh, and you know that consistency is kind of a hurdle and kind of an issue that could be addressed to make just more games just playable, kind of more back and forth games, or maybe a game gets to be played at all. Because sometimes, like, if your hand is just terrible, there's just nothing you can do, regardless of if you're going like first or second. And then there's also like RNG aspects of like, did you open the card you need to open to be able to play the game? And maybe let's say you do have like 20 copies of that card, literally half your deck, but you're still not getting any copies of the card because of playing battle RNG. And how often can this happen? And then there's also the aspect of maybe you did get the starter, but you only got like exactly the starter. Like you only copies of Alistair. Maybe you also run like Diabellstar, uh, or Fiendsmith or whatever with Alistair, right? And you just because you open too many copies of the same card, you lose out on a lot of potential plays you could have had if you just had maybe one other card or two separate other cards, and your opponent actually didn't get hit with the same issue, and they just opened better in the sense that they actually have 5 different cards in their hand. Then they can win off of that, and that RNG aspect is just kind of just irritating, I suppose. In some cases, I guess it is fine to open multiple copies of the same card. So in the case of like Ash Blossom Joe Ring, opening 2 copies of Ash Blossom is fine, but like when you throw the third one in there, that one should pretty much never come up. So yeah, sometimes it's a little bit manageable, sometimes it's completely unmanageable. Also, fun little fact, little tidbit here is if you opened like, let's say, well, I guess it's limited now, but if you opened 2 copies of Cult by the Grave and then 2 or 3 copies of Ash Blossom Joe Ring, in theory, that this has the same odds as just hard opening Exodia. Like if you have a straight full house like this. So I'm assuming like we have a semi-limited card plus a unlimited card, and you open all 5 of these exact cards. That this is like literally the same as opening Exodia. So not that likely to happen, but still sucks when it does. And the fact that it can happen is somewhat of an issue. It's not that big of an issue with this exact hand because the odds of this are so insanely low. I think it was like something around like 1 in 100,000 or 1 in 10,000. So somewhere within that range. So it's not like something that's happening that often. But what is often is that you will get like hands where you just have a 2 of, or maybe multiple 2 ofs, because you're playing a lot of 3 ofs in your deck to maximize kind of consistency. But then you have this other consistency issue that stems from that, which isn't fixed. And now that I'm thinking about what I'm saying, I was trying to stay positive for most of this video, but I mean, it still comes back into this, like, yeah. So the game has a lot of cool aspects and a lot of consistency things. And I mean, worth mentioning, I guess, like the extra deck's pretty solid. Like the whole concept of extra deck, I think is pretty solid in the sense that it's just makes decks more consistent. So if I have like my archetypal starter, I can go into my boss monsters. I don't have to wait for my boss monsters. Like I don't have to wait to draw it, and that whole terrible RNG aspect. I can at least put something on the board pretty consistently that does something. Like, I mean, SB Pass. This is definitely not the best end board of all time, but if you don't have any options aside from SB Pass, at least you can be glad you have the option of SB Pass, right? So that's cool, I guess. I mean, Typhon's nice too sometimes. sometimes there are some rare scenarios where I'm just wishing, damn, I wish I had two or three Typhon right about now because those situations do sometimes come up, interestingly enough. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.